But yeah, my name's Neil Cliffe. I'm going to be talking about the Drought and Climate Adaptation Program and particularly the grazing industry projects that we're funding in this program. Just thought I'd go through a bit of background initially about DCAP. The focus I'm going to talk about is the grazing industry projects. We do have other projects in other industries, but the focus here is the rangelands and grazing industry in particular. I'm going to talk about some project outputs, some project outcomes and next steps. And then I'm going to introduce some, hopefully, good news around transitioning to Queensland's Drought Reform and how we're partnering with the Future Drought Fund in a significant collaboration for industry, I think. So just in terms of DCAP, it's been running since 2016 and it has three core objectives. We're all about improving the capacity of farmers, producers, graziers to better prepare for and manage drought, better manage climate variability and adapt to a changing climate. We've got about, over the last 6 years, since 2016, we've had about $65 million in in-kind or direct funding, and we've got a nice balance between RD and E, we think. So I've got applied research there for a reason. It is applied. It's we don't want to do any research necessarily that isn't going to be used by producers on the ground. Smaller amount of development activity, and importantly, a large contribution to extension and communications, 36% of the program. Program governance has been important. We've got a very active steering committee that oversees the program. And we've also got an independent technical reference panel, which has provided advice as projects have been selected to fund and to monitor progress of those projects as well. Monitoring and evaluation is very important to us. We've got an independent evaluation consultant who's supporting us. And we've also, at the end of 2020, funded a benefit cost analysis of the program and the 9 core projects within it. So we wanted to gauge whether we were actually getting value for money for what we were investing in, I suppose. Communications is very important. I guess our main focus for communications is around the Long Paddock website. Put your hands up if you've been on the Long Paddock website. I hope many of you have been, but that's one of our main communication channels that we're using. So who's involved in DCAP? Well, back in 2016, we developed established the Queensland Drought Mitigation Centre, which is a partnership between DAF, Department of Ag and Fish, Department of Environment and Science, and USQ. We've got a lot of other partners as well, industry, Ag Force, QFF, the Bureau, it's been talked about earlier on today, the UK Met Office as well, important partner, MLA funding a large project. We've also got useful collaborations with universities nationally and overseas as well, and also other state government departments are involved as well. And in one particular project, our major extension project, we're also partnering with Western Queensland NRM bodies, so Southwest, Central and Northern Queensland NRM bodies. It's very much a collaboration between producers and researchers and extension officers. The key grazing industry activity summary is around, I'm just going to go through a few of these. It's developing forage management tools for grazing management. We've got some social research happening to help understand how to support grazing decision-making better. And we've already heard today about some work that's happening in the Forearm Project, but we're investing in improvements to climate models to develop and customise climate forecasts for Northern Australia. We recognise that in the past that there's been a lot of investment in climate forecasting, perhaps in Southern Australia. We're trying to right that wrong in a sense by investing in activities that might support better forecasting in Northern Australia. So things like timing of wet season onset, rainfall bursts, as has been mentioned by Krista, extreme rainfall and temperature events, flash droughts even. Importantly, we've also had some investment in applied economic analysis of drought management strategies in grazing businesses. And I think Mike will be referring to that in his talk later on in this session. And importantly, we've got a large extension component in the most drought-prone areas of Queensland. So the southwest, the west, central west, northwest, and north of the state. And that's in a project that I'll share in more detail shortly. Just to go into the individual projects in a bit more detail, the first project is one that's run by Des, and Jackie Wilcox is the project leader. I mentioned Long Paddock before, and that project has redeveloped Long Paddock. Many of you who've been on that platform will have seen the new long paddock compared to the old one. I think it's a much better platform. There's a DCAP page on that platform too, where you can access much of the DCAP reports and other information about DCAP. This project has developed new forage products, a pasture growth alert, and a long-term carrying capacity report. And there are a lot of other forage products too, which you might find useful. The next phase of this is to develop a My Forage platform, which is just about to be released. And this will allow producers to fine-tune and customise some of that forage report information for their own properties. Also, this project has produced the wet, dry and other rainfall posters. Those of you who are here in Longreach can actually grab some of those posters up the back if you'd like to and take them with you. The benefit cost ratio for this particular project was 5.7 to 1, so a good result there. Second project was this social research that I talked about. Fiona McCartney in DES is that project leader. And one of the outputs from that project is to produce some animations which have supported understanding of rainfall probabilities. They've also looked at behavioural insights to understand how producers make decisions and what associated biases there might be around some of that decision making. And they've conducted a process with some of our extension staff in the department about customer journey mapping. So this is getting a detailed understanding of what some of the barriers might be to key grazing management decisions. I think in the southwest they looked at early weaning, and in the central west here they looked at wet season spelling, I think. I could be corrected on that. But it's a useful way for extension staff to understand their client base a bit better and how they can overcome barriers to adoption. Benefit cost ratio for that project is 5.9 to 1. The Northern Australian Climate Program, David Coburn chaired the last session. He's the leader of that program, and it's around improving and customising climate forecasts for Northern Australia, as I mentioned before. Involves the Bureau and the UK Met Office fast-tracking climate model improvement. Without this investment in this project, we might have been years off getting the model improved to better forecast climate forecasts in Northern Australia. It's looking at forecasting wet season onset, rainfall bursts and flash droughts, as I mentioned before. And importantly, there's a network of extension through to 13 climate mates across Northern Australia, which are embedded within industry, working with industry in that program. Importantly also, they're feeding back to the Bureau and the UK Met Office things that they might see that need to be done to support producer decision making on farm. Benefit cost ratio for that is 5.3 to 1, significant value there too. Krista covered the Forewarned is Forearm project. We've got a small part in that. We're collaborating with USQ in the red meat and sugar industries, and we're a very small part in funding this $14 million national multi-industry project. So the leverage we're getting from our investment there is very significant. And Krista mentioned the new forecast products, and grazing industry feedback from folk like you in the rangelands has gone into finalising the 5 operational forecast products that will be produced shortly. Benefit cost ratio is really significant for that project, 7.7 to 1. Another really significant project, which I mentioned is going to be talked about shortly by Mike, is a Grazing Economics project led by Marie Bowen in DAF. It's producing better economic information for producers to prepare for, respond and recover from drought, but it's also looking at other options in grazing enterprises, a whole range of different options, not just drought. It uses a whole farm economic analysis approach and uses a representative regional property. And there are reports for each of the regions in that map on the right-hand side. So if you happen to have a property in any of those regions, and those reports really are for you, I really commend them to you. And they're evaluating a range of strategies which either would improve your profit, make little difference potentially, or send you broke. So if you've got a grazing property in these regions, and I think that they'll be really interesting reports for you to read. Some of the strategies involve phosphorus supplementation, legume establishment, diversifying livestock enterprises, other markets, expansion, etc. And one of the conclusions is that each region had strategies to improve profit, but many strategies had little impact or a negative impact on profitability. Benefit cost ratio there is 4.7 to 1. And these are copies of the report. I really commend them to you, as I said, and get on to Marie Bowen if you want more information. The last project is a Grazing Futures project led by Joe Rolfe in the north. aims to build business and drought resilience around three key themes: people and business, grazing land management, and animal production. And the project's heavily based on partnerships and collaboration across service providers in the West, NRM bodies, counselling services, Queensland Health, etc. And delivery, importantly, is based on producer-identified needs, workshops, field days, or one-on-one, whatever's appropriate. It also, importantly, links closely with other DCAP grazing projects. Benefit cost ratio there is 4.6 to 1. So what about some outputs and outcomes? It's all right to do this work, I suppose, but what are we actually achieving? So there have been over 150 journal and other articles, and DCAP is also funding the special Rangelands Journal special issue that's coming out. So we've got a lot of interesting papers there that Andrew Ash talked about earlier. I commend that to you as well. Extension and education activities, over 12,000 producers have been engaged, over 650 workshops, field days, etc. have been conducted. Importantly, practice change where the rubber hits the road, case studies, 38, 91 narratives which explain and communicate some change that's been made, over 800 examples recorded of practice change on property. Independent evaluation that we've done has reported that DCAP has high-level user engagement, so very engaged with producers, and outputs are relevant and user-friendly. It's very important to us, we feel. And the overall program benefit cost analysis result is a ratio of 5.3 to 1, which is very good for a program of this type and important for bean counters and the taxpayers like you and me. What do producers say? Now we have more confidence using climate forecasts when making many of our business decisions. Using economic analysis has been a game changer in our management decisions. After a phosphorus workshop, a really good workshop, it made me realise there are more things I can do to tweak the supplement I'm feeding to maximise performance. Changing our turn-off age led to $70,000 a year benefit. So there's some really good, I guess, testimony of what some of the projects have done, and quite a few around the economics work, which has been great. So next steps, well, most grazing workshops are going to continue for another year, and we hope to fund DCAP version 3 moving forward if we possibly can. I want to move on briefly now to new drought assistance measures, because I think there's some good news in that, and DCAP is partnering with the Future Drought Fund to deliver this activity. So just in terms of drought reform in Queensland, most of you are aware, but most of the assistance has been provided to industry during drought. Now that with the drought reform, there'll be assistance and support available before, during, or after drought as well. And we're partnering with the Future Drought Fund to run a farm business resilience program. So the Grazing Futures project, which I just talked about, is now going to morph into this farm business resilience program and deliver with the Future Drought Fund funding, supercharging that project, which is a really good outcome, we feel. There'll be a farm management grant available. A Q-Rider will deliver around developing a farm business resilience plan. There's a planning element which producers will get supported to produce. And with that plan, you'll be able to access a potential drought preparedness grant of up to $50,000 and also access drought ready and recovery loans up to $250K. In drought, there'll still be support as well. There'll be an emergency drought assistance loan up to $50K with nil interest, and the drought carry-on loan will figure there as well. And in drought recovery, the drought ready and recovery loan will be in play as well. So this is a step change, I think, in the way that drought support is administered in Queensland. Those grants and loans will support installing new permanent capital infrastructure, but you'll need a farm business plan to be able to access them. So things that these grants could support could be new water tanks and troughs, dam construction and expansion, drilling a new working bore, storage, mixing and feeding out equipment. So things that many producers would want to invest in will be supported through this grant if you want to access it, but you need the plan to do it. This program will be funded by state and federal government annually to the tune of $6.4 million. And there'll be industry programs to develop to support your industry planning and implementing those plans as well. So that's an important element. And it'll be aiming to, it's not just about drought, it's about aiming to improve productivity, profitability and environmental outcomes as well. So I'm sure there's something in it for producers across the state, not just in the grazing industry, but across commodity groups as well. And as I mentioned, the Grazing Futures project is morphing into the Grazing Futures Livestock Business Resilience Project, and will be funded and supercharged out of this program, and more economic work will be funded as a result of that to fill in some of those gaps that I mentioned in that economics work. The bell has rung. If you want to find out more about GCAP and the Farm Business Planning Project, go to Long Paddock or those addresses there. Thanks for listening. It's been great to be in Longreach. Take care.